Welcome to Uncle's channel. Thanks for watching today. And let's continue our journey to finish every single Game Boy and Game Boy Color game. And today I focus on a game called Cosmo Tank for the original Game Boy. Now this is a really unique title because it combines like multiple different genres of gameplay all into one cartridge. Like it's a first-person shooter, but it's also like an overhead adventure, but it's also like a space shooter. And so it's like multiple genres all sort of squished together. And surprisingly, it actually comes across as a pretty cohesive project, even though it's sort of mixing genres like that. Now this particular game did get moved up in our queue a good bit because Retro Ed UK requested one of my very early videos, and I apologize for just now getting around to it. But Cosmo Tank is today's subject, and if there's a game that you would like to see me cover sooner than later, let me know the name of the game in the comments down below, and just like Cosmo Tank, I'll move it right on up. But let's go ahead and get into the actual game. Now I always like to start the games off by looking at the box art for the game first, and the box art for Cosmo Tank is pretty iconic here because I really enjoy like the imagery for it. Now first off, you're going to notice the title of Cosmo Tank. It's written in a font very similar to the game Arkanoid, at least to me anyway. Every time I see it, that's exactly what I think about. But essentially, you know, the title summarizes the game. You're a tank out in the cosmos. Has like a little spaceship and has your tank down here at the bottom. Looks very similar, like something you see out of like Armored Core nowadays. The storyline for it is you are basically Alpha Tiger 1, and you're a part of something called Project Cosmos, and you're basically trying to reconquer the galaxy, or these 5 planets that have been taken over by an insect alien of sorts. And you can see right there on the cover one of the little spider insects off to the side, and you're going to be fighting all different types of insects throughout this entire game. And some of the insects are a little bit more crab-like, but still, you know, insects none the same. Or even like, I don't know, it's like a spider, technically an insect, it's an arachnid. But I don't know, we're going too far down a little rabbit hole here. You're fighting insects is what the game says and what most of them look like. But overall, like a really cool cover, very sci-fi, very futuristic looking, and I love the cover. Now when you start the actual game up here, you have very much of a 60s sci-fi look to it. Cosmo Tank sort of comes floating in here with a little starry background. Reminds me a little bit of like the original Star Trek show. But also the music in the background is very reminiscent of the original Metroid. Sort of the haunting one note at a time. The word isometric wants to come to my mind. I don't know if that's using the correct term or not, but very much of a one note at a time haunting music, and then it like kicks up into like a Mega Man type beat, and it's going really well, and the music just sort of stops. It's a really cool intro song, but I don't know, it just sort of comes to an abrupt end, and then the game sits in silence instead of repeating over and over. But when you start the actual game up here, you have a little bit of a menu, and you have a quest mode, which is how we're going to get the credits to roll when we go through the quest mode. We'll come back to that. Training mode, which allows you to go through basically 10 training missions and try to get a ranking of A on every one of them. And basically like little aliens or little insect aliens are going to come from all corners of the map, and you sort of have to defend your area, take out as many as possible in a certain time limit. And every one of the rounds is like a different little alien. And then you have the versus mode, and the versus mode is going to be where you can link up to another Game Boy and you can actually battle against your one tank versus the other tank. I didn't get a chance to do that, but it does sound like a pretty fun little game mode. Very much like a battle tanks of sorts. But just goes to show, like, once you finish the main quest mode, there is still plenty of content this game has to offer for players who want to continue on. Now, when we load up the quest mode, my leader here, he basically tells me that we want to destroy the life force or the life core of every single planet within the solar system in order to take out the hive or the insect alien that's been invading here. So every planet is going to have a boss alien you have to take out in order to get the life core from that particular boss. Now, when the gameplay itself begins, you are going to start off in the top-down adventure mode of sorts, and you have your little tank here. You can shoot out your little bullets, and at first, like, the controls a little bit sort of wonky because like the advancement controls as well as the aiming controls are all like coupled into one with the D-pad. But I'd say after like maybe 5 minutes of playing, like it does feel pretty natural. And so when you first load the game up, don't get turned off by the controls because it really does come pretty quickly as far as like mastery goes. And there's all these little alien bugs or insects that are going to come, you know, try to attack you here. And there's a never-ending swarm of bugs. Like no matter how many bugs you destroy, more bugs are going to show up and continue to try to attack your little tank here. Now, as you're exploring around on the planet, you are going to come across these little walls. And if you press the A button, you're going to set off a bomb. It's going to destroy every enemy on the screen, but it's also going to destroy the little walls in front of you, and you can continue to explore the planet. But eventually, you're going to come across these little caves here, and when you go into a cave, the game is going to swap genres on you, and is now going to become a first-person shooter game where you're now inside the tank, and you explore the cave one square at a time, or one little block at a time, moving in cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west. And you basically just sort of navigate the cave, trying to find different bosses and different towers and different energy cores and things like that. But as you're journeying through it, you're also going to be attacked by enemies. And anytime like an enemy attacks you, like you go into like sort of a battle mode, almost like an RPG of sorts. And so like the enemy appears on your screen and you can no longer like move in your cardinal directions. You basically are in control of the turret and you sort of, you know, scan around in one place, trying to find the enemy and shoot the enemy and take it out. And you can see a little map down here at the bottom, or a little compass or a radar rather, and you can see the enemy sort of circling around you. You sort of have to match up where the enemy's at in order to take the enemy out. And I know it does sound like really rudimentary, like how the controls are working inside of a 3D environment, but you have to keep in mind, this is 1990 on the Game Boy, and this is like probably one of the only 3D games on the Game Boy at the time. And to me, this is doing a fantastic job with it, and was somewhat of a trailblazer when it comes to the overall movement, or at least swapping genres into 3D on the system. And I did forget to mention like which type of aliens you're going to come across inside the cave for these one-on-one battles, but it's going to start off with things like a praying mantis or flies, and later on develop into more unique alien creatures like little plant-looking aliens with tentacles and like one giant eyeball. And there's a good variation of enemies as you go, but they're all going to be based around the idea of like insect alienoids for this overall game. Now, as you're exploring the cave, you're not just simply taking out these aliens and trying to, find an exit to the cave. There's also like little rooms you can go into, and the rooms are going to house like different, alien spaceships or alien computers. And when you go in there, if you destroy that, you're either going to take away one of the energy cores of the overall planet, which is going to hinder the life force when you go up against the final boss, or you're going to come across a control tower. And the control tower is way more important than the energy cores. I guess not for like taking the boss out, but just simply for playing the game. Because when you take out a control tower, it actually gives you a map of the overall cave that you're trying to explore. And this is extraordinarily handy because like you can get lost pretty easily, exploring one section at a time without a map. And so this allows you to sort of map out where you want to go, where the exits are going to be, where the energy cores are going to be, where the main boss is going to be. But the only flaw here is they don't actually allow you to select the map at any given time. If you ever want to see the map, you have to go back to the control room in order to access the map, which is really, really cumbersome is the word I was looking for. And so like what I decided to do is I just simply began to draw all the maps on my little note page here, because I keep notes of like every single game that I play through. That's how I make these reviews here and remember all the things I want to talk about. But I just simply make maps of all the caves I'm going through, and that way I can sort of refer to the directions I want to go. And if you want to go through the game yourself, I highly suggest making maps of all the caves as you journey. And none of them are like super large, so I'm not like asking you to make a full page of just maps. I'd say everyone's no more than probably that big, which means literally nothing to you. I'll post a picture of my maps on the video here, and that way you can actually understand what I'm talking about. But eventually, after going through enough caves and exploring the overworld enough, I finally come across the final cave, which is going to have the first boss inside the game. And the first boss looks more like a giant robot crab than he does like a insect, which would be a crustacean versus a insect. But does crustaceans fall into arachnid category? Hang on, we're just doing like a whole little nature lesson here. Crustaceans, they're both arthropods, and so same as arachnids. So I guess it's like actually instead of the insects invading, it's arthropods that are invading these planets. So that's what it should say on the back of the box. It should not say insects, it should say arthropods, and that would cover crustaceans, insects, as well as arachnids, which would cover every single boss or every single enemy inside this game. So there we go. We've corrected the back of the box here. It is the invasion of the arthropods and not insects for the game. But regardless, it's a giant crab you're going up against, and it's actually pretty easy here. All you have to do is sort of keep him off to the right side or the left side, and as he's shooting his little, bullet at you, you just sort of have to make sure you're not in the path of that to get hit. And then once he stops shooting the bullet for a second, you just sort of jump over there, fire your few shots, and then jump back out of the picture, and just sort of keep him on the far edge of the corner of the map pretty much the entire battle, and you really won't get hit hardly at all. And really all of the bosses in the game sort of feel the same way. It's like you figure out like how to cheese the boss in a way. It never feels like you're doing like a true one-on-one combat with them. It feels more like you just figure out a way, like how can I hit them without them ever hitting me? And I don't know, the bosses themselves take a ton of hits to kill, and maybe it's just simply because I'm doing sort of these side methods like this. But it does feel like if you went one-on-one combat with them, it would be very, very difficult. But once you defeat the giant crab here, it said you have destroyed the life core of that planet. So now the crustaceans or the arthropods no longer have rule or dominion over this particular planet. And now you have a picture of all the planets in the solar system, and you can choose to go to any planet that you want to in order to explore that and take out the arthropod alien leader of that particular planet and take the life core away from them. And it sort of tells you like which planets are going to have what, sort of give you an idea. Because like every planet, like there's not a particular order that you have to go in, but every planet's going to have like a special power-up ability that's going to affect like other maps you can explore, and also the power of your individual tank here. And so, like I wrote down, like if you want to get the shield, you're gonna have to go to a planet called Gadam. If you want to get to hover, you're gonna have to go to Monoa. If you want the pulse beam, you're gonna have to go to Aquel. And there's actually a fourth planet, and it's just simply called, what was the name of that one? You don't access that one until a little bit later, but it's just simply like letters and numbers, which I'll mention in a second. So I decided I wanted to get the weapon power up first, so I'm going to journey to the planet of Aquel. Now, anytime you want to journey to a planet, the game is going to swap game modes yet again on you, and now you're going to be in like a space shooter, like an old school arcade space shooter, which is sort of like more akin to like Galaga and things like that. But there's one particular game it reminds me of like more than any of them, and it's mainly because like the enemies you're going to come across, also like the little transformation system here, and like also like how the game sort of swaps genre a little bit. It's going to be the game Guardian Legend for the NES, because like in Guardian Legend, you would have these top-down space shooter levels just like this. You have like a little transformation of your character, and then you would explore a giant overworld as your character, trying to figure out like where to go next. Guardian Legend is way more complex than this game. It's way huger than this, or bigger than this game, and it's also way harder than this game. But there's something about like a lot of like the animations, a lot of the enemies, and just like the I guess swapping of genres that really make me think like there might be some similarity between these two games. And I did look it up. Like I tried my hardest to figure out who the programmers are for it. I couldn't figure out like there's any actual connection there. But I did discover one thing as I was looking up information about the game. And that was something that I sort of missed out on. Like every time you just kill an enemy, you actually get experience. And after you kill some enemies, you get like a little P block. And when you get a P block, it actually upgrades your laser when you get like a 10 P blocks in a row. And so like you can continue to upgrade your level in order to make your tank stronger, and also to upgrade your life force, as well as upgrade your weapon. However, every time you have a game over, you lose all of your upgrades. And I die a lot in this game. And so especially like when I figured out early on, like when you do die, you just resume exactly back where you died. Anytime you have a game over, you resume exactly back where you had a game over from. And like there's no punishment at all, except it takes away your weapon and your armor and things like that. But every time you die, you also get bombs. And so like the bombs are really powerful in a lot of cases. So it's like, do you want your bombs? Do you want sort of infinite lives? Or do you want to power up your ship? And truth be told, I ended up going with the bombs and extra lives way more often than any of the power-ups. And so, but that is an option that I just simply didn't know about. And so it has a little bit of a RPG element in it as well. But the overall top-down space shooter here, a really cool short segment as you're traveling to your planet. You can encounter things like rocks and giant eyeball monsters and little insects, and you eventually get to the planet and you go down on that planet. However, there was a massive disappointment when I got to Aquel, because you cannot explore out into the water here until you actually have the hover unit attached to your tank. And so my journey to Aquel was completely wasted. And so then it said I need to go to Monoa in order to get the hover unit. So off I go to Monoa as my next mission. And once again, you have to go through the little pilot part here where you travel to the planet, which it does add to like the immersion of the game a little bit, having to actually travel there, which is pretty cool. But you travel around Monoa pretty much doing the exact same thing, fighting off the horde of enemies here, going on the little space stations in order to refill your health. One space station you actually go on to, there's a character that looks a lot like 80s Michael Jackson, and he tells you that he can give you the hover unit. He gives you the hover unit. It doesn't change the look of your spaceship at all, and you don't have to do anything like special about it. It just simply automatically equips the hover unit. And now if I want to go back to Aquel, I can explore all the waters of that planet. But while I'm here, I might as well just simply finish up the planet of Monoa. And as I'm journeying through here, it's pretty much like the overall same gameplay mechanics. You explore the overworld. You don't have to try really hard because you have unlimited continues, unlimited game overs. And even when you go into the first-person cave mode, same story there. You don't have to try too hard because you're unlimited continues, unlimited game over, but you destroy all the little energy forces. You can find all the control towers, take out some of the enemies, and you eventually come across your next boss. Now the next boss here is a really cool one. It's a giant centipede, and the centipede like comes up, and you can only attack centipede when it's like fully extended on the screen. You can attack the little belly of it, and then you journey off to the side and wait for him to fire his little shots out, and then journey back up, and you get a few more little shots in on him. And it reminds me a lot of the game 3D World Runner for the NES. I think this game was actually made by Squaresoft back in the day before they got fully into RPGs. But I always loved that game. We rented it a whole lot as kids. But there's something about like the first-person view here, taking out a centipede, that just reminds me a heck of a lot of 3D World Runner. But when you take him out, you've now got the second life core. So you've conquered 2 planets, and now I can journey my way back to Aquel now to have my little hover unit. Now when you get to Aquel, obviously you're exploring more in the swampy area or on the ocean itself. And the enemies on Aquel for the overworld are more annoying. They like journey around your little spaceship, And they basically sort of hover there, and then they all start closing in on you one at a time. So you have to be fairly careful about destroying those, unless you just simply don't care about dying because you have unlimited continues. But if you're trying to go for, like, actually upgrading your equipment and such, and you don't want to die constantly, like, this is a very annoying overworld enemy that's just simply going to keep coming back and slowing your progress down drastically. But as we're exploring the planet of Aquel here, we obviously come across some caves, we go into them, we get first person mode again, and as we're exploring through the cave, we actually rescue an investigator whose name is George. Now, I can't help but think that, like, George here is named after George Carlin because, like, the imagery is just, like, spot on to me of what George Carlin looked like back in the day. And I could be wrong, but I think there's some inspiration here from the developers on naming this particular investigator. But the investigator tells me that there's a mad scientist out there, or a mad professor, and he's the one who's created the alien race of these anthropods. And the mad scientist has also created an ultimate weapon called Gregor, and when he uses his ultimate weapon, he will take control of the entire solar system, and his hive aliens will run about and destroy all of humanity. And so, and I may be embellishing the story a little bit there, but there is a weapon named Gregor that we're going to take out in order to actually finish the game up. So we have a little bit of a foreshadowing on who the final boss is going to be inside the game. Now, as we continue to explore the planet of Aquel even further, we come across another one of these little bases where we think we're going to get like a, a shield upgrade, or just simply a hovercraft or something like that. But instead, it's sort of like a fake base. We go in there, and there's giant cockroach creatures in here. And this little alien insect is going to try to slice you to pieces with his little razor claws. He can journey up and down the screen and fire his razor claws out on each time. And if you sort of play like a corner game a little bit here, he's not too bad, but it does take a few times to like develop a strategy. And when you take him out, this is when you get the item or the weapon upgrade, and you can now charge your tank up and have a massive blast that comes out instead of just simply one little bitty beam at a time. And so we now officially have our weapon upgrade. But we continue on through the planet of Aquel here. We finally come across the main boss. And the main boss is like a weird anthropod looking creature. It has these almost like a minotaur mixed with like a crab, mixed with like a demon. I don't know, you can see the image here. It's a really weird one, but you basically have to destroy his two little hover arms off to the side, and once you destroy those, then you can begin to focus on the actual creature. And it's the same as like the other bosses. You sort of figure out, like, where to stand exactly in order to sort of cheese the boss best that you can. And after this, we do head off to the planet of Gadam. And Gadam has a little bit different environment than some of the rest of them. It's going to have like these giant skeletons hung around in the soil or in the sand. Unique aesthetic, but they do overuse it a little bit, and so like there's the little skeletons all throughout the environment. It might have been better or a little bit cooler if they sort of hid one every now and then for the aesthetic, but still, they're trying to mix it up a little bit beyond just simply being a desert or being a aqua planet. And when you do enter in one of the bases here, the base gives you a great hint that said there are 2 monsters you have to take out in order to open up the ability to fight the main boss of the planet. And so as you journey around, you do come across 2 more little bases. They're sort of like the wolf in sheep's clothing here, because you go into them and a giant cockroach is in there. But instead of being the one where it like throws out like little razor claws at you, this one shoots out like little beams. And so like I figured out, if you stand off to the far left hand side around this position right here, like you can just simply sit there and blast away at the cockroach, and you can take him out without ever having to like worry about dying. A really good strategy, but does sort of once again cheese the boss. I feel like all the bosses in this game I pretty much cheesed my way through, but it does unlock the final door you can go into and fight the main boss of this particular level. And this main boss does feel like straight out of Metroid. Like, look at the little glass on top of his head. Looks like the little creatures inside of Metroid, like the little glass thing, hovering over the brains of the creature. But there are 2 individual phases for this boss. One phase has like his little legs down, way easier, and then he like pulls the legs up, and he can like hover around the arena really fast. And when he does that, like I just try to like avoid looking at him, and when you avoid looking at him, he can't actually shoot you. And so wait till he gets his little legs back down, and then go back into attack phase. And really not that hard once you figure out that strategy. Now the next planet we go to is the planet of DN1, the one I tended to forget about earlier. And once again, it's a similar voyage as all the rest of them. Its aesthetic for this one, kind of like little pulsating lava pits is what I assume they are. You journey through it. They do say that you need to find the sensor unit operator, and only after you defeat the final boss of this area do you get to see that sensor unit operator. But as you're journeying through it, you eventually do come to the main boss. It's almost like a giant octopus type creature. It has like little jellyfish that are coming to it, and you have to destroy the jellyfish, and then like a giant fly comes out of its head, and then while the fly is distracted, you have to try to shoot and actually destroy the octopus itself. This is probably the easiest boss in the entire game, and this was probably one of the ones I beat like on the first or second try. It's just really easy to figure out. And once you finish him off, like a little egg comes down, and I used a bomb to blow it up, because I knew it was going to be a the sensor unit operator I was rescuing. But then like the sensor unit operator was actually just a skeleton. I'm like, did I just kill the sensor unit operator? Or was this like mainly like part of the main game here, the story? I don't know. Maybe you're supposed to shoot it open like I did with George earlier. But I blew it up and it's just a skeleton inside here. But the sensor unit operator gives me the sensor unit, which allows me to see the final area I need to go to in the game, which is going to be the planet of Gadoro, which is going to obviously house their Gregor, the final weapon. Now, the planet of Gadoro is a really cool transition or fighting to get to that planet. You go through, your normal little flying simulator here, and when you get to the end of it, there's actually a boss you have to fight against. It's like a giant Herculean beetle, and on the planet itself is going to also have Herculean beetles, but it's just cool to actually have a boss fight in this space shooter mode here. And so, once again, not too bad, but at least it is trying to mix the gameplay up as much as possible. Now, when you get to the planet itself, it is more of a unique planet. It sort of takes after Mega Man to a degree, because when you're here, you have to go through and you have to find and fight all of the original bosses throughout all the planets, again, before you can actually go and fight Gregor here. And so, you know the strategy by this point. They're actually a little bit easier because you have to charge up shot for every single one of the bosses. But you journey through all of them again. I was probably most excited to see the one with the octopus and jellyfish. There's just something cool about the little jellyfish sort of moving their way toward the base. But I also like the centipede boss as well. This game has a lot of really cool bosses. But you finally do get to Gregor here. And when you're talking to Gregor, which I assume is actually maybe the mad professor you're talking to, it's Gregor. I don't know, but the little image here actually looks a lot like Dr. Manhattan from The Watchmen. And so that's all I could see when I'm thinking about it. So we're going to say Dr. Manhattan is the mad professor who's created Gregor. And the Gregor's a giant spider robot that you're fighting up against. And there was a hint earlier in the game that said if you attack his hands, then you can destroy him a little bit faster. And he has like a little force field or shield in front of him. And only after you destroy the hands does the shield go down. But truth be told, you don't actually attack the hands. You have to attack the feet off to the side of the hands or the legs. And when you destroy those, the hands do blow up. And then you can finally, the force field comes down and you can continue to attack really the exact same spot you were earlier. And you'll have Gregor taken out in no time. Now, when you destroy Gregor, it says you have to return back to your home base. You fly out of there. You do see the giant ship here. What they call it again? Gideon. Gadoro. You see it blow up in the background. Your ship flies off. And now you have officially won the game. It even says like Tiger Alpha 1 has officially completed her mission. And at this point, the credits do begin to roll, and you actually have a really good little song in the background. Truth be told, like there are parts of the soundtrack that are like really, really good, and some parts that are like Metroid ripoffs and sort of forgettable. The title screen, really, really good. The screen, anytime you are flying in your spaceship, the overhead shooter levels, really, really excellent. And then the credit scene here is also top tier when it comes to 8-bit chiptune music. But let's talk about the game as an overall. Now, this game to me was actually a lot of fun. As I was journeying through it, like, yeah, there are some parts that sort of gimmicky, or some parts that were like sort of where I said you're sort of cheesing the bosses, but at the same time, like you felt like you earned that cheese by playing that particular boss over and over to learn exactly how to predict the moves, how to sort of figure out your angles just right. And I'd love cheesing bosses. I mean, like I make like tons of my videos on the channel about like cheesing bosses in the Souls games. And so like figuring out the little, exploits on these bosses was right down my alley. I really enjoyed that. The boss design themselves, like I said, I enjoyed the vast majority of them. They all had a cool design. I always enjoyed the look of anthropods anyway, and a race of alien anthropods, even better. But I also like the ability to sort of swap between the different game modes. It sort of kept the gameplay fresh a little bit. If the entire game had been first person, you're just simply exploring through the caves, the game would have got pretty dull pretty fast because it had been so repetitive. By doing the overworld, the space shooter, and the first person, it made the game feel so much richer than it probably ever would have if they just simply focused on one particular genre. And I also like that there's different ways to play the game. Like there's the way that I played it, where you just sort of go through like unlimited dying, unlimited continues, unlimited game overs, and you just sort of resume back to where you're at, and you sort of start over your weapons. And so it's going to take a lot longer to kill all the enemies, but you don't have to worry about dying. And I also like that there's the idea you can go about the RPG route, where if you want to try to stay alive, refill your health, keep all that in check, you can get some really powerful weapons, really powerful armor, and you can go to finish the game that way. So there's like different ways to play the game. And then also when you finish, you can go through and play all the training modes and then the versus mode if you want at the same time. And so like there's so much like inside this particular cartridge. It's not just simply swapping game modes. It's different ways to play the game. It's different, post-game content. This game is a really rich game when it comes to all of that. Now, I say all this praise. Now, are there any cons of the game? Well, truth be told, like you have to take into account like the era the game came out. Obviously, the 3D stuff, like I said earlier, is a little bit rudimentary, but at the same time, it's 1990, and so some of the enemies you encounter inside the caves outside the bosses aren't really, the most exciting battles. And the continuous supply of enemies that come at you in the overworld isn't always ideal as well. But as an overall game, I'd probably say Cosmo Tank deserves we're going to go with an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. I would definitely play it again at some point. And it was sort of like my style of type of game to play. Mix the gameplay up, give me my cheese tactics, and just a really charming game as an overall. But if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check my other videos listed up above, and go out there, find a great game to play. Simply have a great rest of the day.